Alrighty, welcome. Thank you for starting a couple minutes late with us. But my name is Maggie, and I'm here with Purse Strings. And we're here every Thursday putting on these wonderful lives. And all month of, what is it, June, we are talking about investing, which is so fun. And so let's see, earlier this month, we have talked about cryptocurrency investing. And we have talked about real estate investing. I'm actually at a real estate conference right now, so I can't wait to bring this education about different types of investments. But today we're going to talk about ESG investing. And we have our Purse Strings approved professional, Stephanie McCullough, with us today, this way. So Stephanie, could you give a little intro about yourself for those who don't know you?
Sure. So I'm a financial planner. I've been doing this work almost 25 years. I'll have to start saying 25 years in 2 months. And it was a career change for me, so you can start doing the math. But to me, what is really exciting about helping women, especially with their money, and that's my, area of specialty, is that it's such an area of stress, and it doesn't have to be. Like, we beat ourselves up. We think we should know this stuff, but no one taught us. So that's why I applaud so much what Purse Strings is doing, bringing the education, and we need to knock down the shame and the guilt that so many women feel, and that gets in our way around making positive money moves so we can control our own futures.
Awesome, exactly. And so, the whole story has always been, we need to save our money, we keep it in the bank, all this stuff. So many women have so much money in the bank. I'm glad they have the money, but it should be invested because it's losing money. And so that's why all month we want to talk about different ways of investing. You don't have to send everything to the S&P 500 or to the man, as I always like to say. There's all these different ways. And so, we're going to talk about ESG today. And really, the first question is, what is ESG investing? I mean, let's clarify those words.
Oh my gosh, it's such a big issue, and it's a great question, right? And there's not a lot of agreement on it. In fact, there's recently been a little bit of hullabaloo, including our buddy Elon Musk, who trashed the whole idea of ESG because his company Tesla got kicked out of one of the indexes for not being maybe quite as responsible as he'd like to think it is. So,
Interesting.
like, since even I've been in the industry, there's really been an evolution in this area. Overall, I would say, like, there's all these different terms you can talk about. Used to be called socially responsible investing or ethical investing. ESG and stands for environmental, social, and governance. And really, those are all kind of adjectives, right? Referring to different points of data that an ESG investor would include in their analysis of investments. So if you think about it, right, when we talk about this kind of investing, right, investing kind of in the market, stocks and bonds, you're always going to either yourself, or you normally hire someone, whether a mutual fund manager or a financial advisor, to do some analysis for you. Is this a good company to invest in? Is this a good bond to invest in? And we're looking at lots of data points. Is this, a company that's got a good product? Do they have a good profit margin? Are they well run? And then what ESG does is bring in an extra layer of data points, which, include things like, are they, doing good things for the environment or less bad things? The S part is social. So, are they being a responsible citizen in their communities? Are they treating their employees well? Do they have, equitable terms for different employees? Are they looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, that kind of stuff? And then corporate governance is kind of the, are they being transparent with their numbers? Are they being responsible, looking at things like the CEO pay versus the bottom line employees pay, those types of things. And it's kind of like the traditional investors, and I would say this is still out there, but it's a little bit less. Traditional investors would say, oh, you silly, bleeding heart people, all you just want the world to be a greater place, and you have to acknowledge the realities. And, if you're going to eliminate companies that have these issues, you're going to have terrible performance. Which, by the way, has been disproven again and again. There's tons of studies that show that. And then the ESG investors would come back and say, well, you know what? I think if this company has a giant cleanup cost from an oil spill, or huge lawsuits from employees that haven't been treated well, or, that kind of controversy type stuff, that's not good for
Right.
my money being invested in that company. So
Right.
it's really a way of being, I would say the ESG people would say, just a smart investor.
Right. Yeah. And then the money that could be in dividends or in the company is going to these lawsuits, to these other things.
Right.
Not only does it look bad, but it's a lot of financials internally as well. And so, as we can probably gather, every year, people might or might not be part of this ESG community, depending on what things come out. Even on our podcast, somebody was mentioning, I used to be a huge Starbucks fan, but now that they're not promoting or really encouraging unions, I'm hesitant and I'm stepping back, which is really
Yeah.
interesting because Starbucks has always had a really good MO on those different things.
Right.
So you said that it's equal or better return if you are doing this socially conscious investing.
That's what studies have shown, right? And for example, in 2020, it was an interesting kind of case study because a lot of the ESG funds did very well. Well, if you think back in 2020, right, it was lockdown, pandemic, people weren't traveling, so oil prices went way down. One of the factors, and this is something we should talk about, is different people have different issues they want to focus on, right?
Yeah.
But quite a lot of ESG investors are worried about climate change and global warming, and they want to avoid fossil fuels. So maybe there are plenty of like mutual funds, for example, that are fossil fuel free. They don't own oil companies or producers or pipelines or that kind of thing. Well, if you're investing in a time period where the oil companies did terribly and you don't own any, you did better. But that wasn't
Right.
the only reason, right? So I would say anytime you're looking at performance in a short period of time, a year, even maybe a couple years or less than that, it's hard to gauge, right?
And
Different,
that's in
specific factors.
any
Exactly.
stock that you pick. As we could see
Yes,
that the markets have been fluctuating crazy. It's not just,
totally.
environmental or not. It's anything for a year
Yeah.
or two.
But if you look over the longer term, right, especially a lot of people believe that, governmental regulations are turning against fossil fuels. There's been proof. There's this concept of stranded asset risk. So if I'm a coal company that's digging coal out of the ground, and all of a sudden nobody wants to buy coal anymore, I've invested a lot of money into that, and it's going to
Right.
be expensive for me to kind of switch over, right? So, and I mean, even just again, a pandemic issue that came up is hiring and keeping good people, right? So if you're a company that treats its workers responsibly and well, maybe you have less employee turnover, and that's going to be good for business, right? Like the
Right.
hard business numbers. So it's not just a touchy feely, let's feel good about the world type of investment. It is a legitimate way to look at investments.
And so when we kind of, if someone is interested in getting into ESG investing, is this something like, the S&P 500 where it's kind of a group bundle, or do you kind of pick out what you want to do? Because I know environmental, social, governance, those are huge. And so I know
Yeah.
some of it is um, if you're, pro-life or not, if you're, Black Lives Matter, if you're don't like the cult, there's so many options. Can you just kind of dive into that?
Oh, yeah. And that was one of the knocks against back when I was starting socially responsible investing. So I was helping a hospital out with its retirement plan. And there were some employees that really wanted to have some type of socially responsible mutual fund in the lineup of investments that all the employees could pick from. And so we would discuss it with the committees and the CEO and everything. And their pushback was, we're never going to find one fund that's going to satisfy everybody. So why bother trying? Right? Like, okay, so the first part of that sentence might be true, but the second part of that sentence, like, is problematic.
Yeah.
The cool part about what's happened in the world of ESG investing now is there's a proliferation of different products out there. And I'm more of a mutual fund ETF kind of person, right? That's kind of how we run our financial planning practice. But there are so many different options out there, which is good and problematic, right? To your point, like you kind of have to figure out what issues are most important to you. I
Mm-hmm.
always remember one of my clients a few years ago, she wanted to invest in this fund, which focuses on women in leadership. So it's going to hold companies in the US and Europe mostly that had women in the C suite, right? And women on the boards and friendly policies to promote
Right.
women moving up through the ranks. So we were looking at the mutual fund, and she says, wait a minute. Why is General Motors in my fund? I don't want to own General Motors. That's a fossil fuel company, like, cars
Yeah.
polluting. I'm like, yeah, but the CEO is a woman, right? So like you're going to have trade-offs in this kind of
Right.
situation. So I think if you're going to if you would like to find a way to align your investment dollars with your values, step one, and that's step one with financial planning too, what are your values? What's
Hmm.
most important to you? And then go through the steps of doing a little bit of research about what investment options are out there that do, line up with your values. And I think there's no perfect company, there's no perfect
Right.
investment option, there's no perfect human being, right? So,
Right.
if we get focused on what our most important things are, then I think we can get a little bit more direction.
So if someone came to you, do you kind of expect them to have this list of values that you want them to do, or do you kind of do an assessment with them? How does that work?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's kind of evolved over time, right? I actually did last year invest in a new software solution that both does research on funds that are out there, but also has kind of a values assessment type of strategy within it.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
and that's kind of just because it's gotten more complicated with all the options out there. I mean, honestly, the first conversation with clients is usually like, would you like to think about aligning, like, well, backing up a second, right? You make charitable contributions. You buy products that, from socially responsible companies. Like I've got my Warby Parker glasses, and like I buy my Drops laundry detergent because there's no plastic involved, right? Many of my clients and friends are doing those kind of things. But it's kind of a revelation to realize, like, hey, that money you have invested for your future, we can do something similar there, and we can align that with our values. So that's kind of an aha moment for a lot of people. Like, wait a minute, really? Like, I can do that?
Which I love, and I definitely think it's more of a woman thing to kind of speak with your money and really put those values into place. I mean, like, yeah, I have my Kendra Scott earrings. I'm all about her and supporting her and what she does. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, we very much speak with our money, and don't do or don't purchase from different places. So having this ability, when I first learned about it, I was like, wow, I can impact these causes even more than just, a protest or a sign. Like my money's speaking for me, and I'm preparing for retirement.
yeah, totally. And that's one of the cool things about like a mutual fund that's doing this, because you might think, I don't have that much money to invest. How big of a statement can I make? But if you decide to invest in mutual funds with your dollars that have either like an activist type of stance, or like, because there's different kind of styles of ESG investing, right? Like maybe it's a fossil fuel free thing. So
Hmm.
your, I don't know, $10,000, $50,000, $500,000 is not going to be in oil companies. Like that's making a statement. Or it's going to be in oil companies that are trying to be the best in breed, right? And make
Right.
changes and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I would say don't get discouraged, even if you feel like you don't have a lot of dollars to do this with, because again, with all the new products that are out there, you can make a difference even with a small amount.
And if you're going to be investing in anyways, you might as well put it to, where your heart is, because the $10,000 you're going to want to put away for retirement. It is what it is, and you want it invested. So you might as well have it speaking with your heart, even if you think that's, less money than other opportunities.
Right, right. And, I mean, a lot of people like the old kind of advice from the kind of old line financial advisors was, oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry your pretty little head. Just make as much money as you can and then give it away. Well, ick.
Right.
And no, like that's kind of an old fashioned viewpoint. Like, not only is this a legitimate way to invest and to go for good returns, but you can really make an impact.
And I think that's the biggest thing, is that the returns are rather equal. It's
Yeah,
not, because it definitely back in the day, it had that bad rep, and that bad rep was true, but things have
right.
really advanced since then. And so that's something that we're definitely trying to change.
Yeah, and I think like in the maybe the first iteration, and not like I've been around forever, right? But one of the early iteration of socially responsible investing was really kind of exclusionary. We call them screens, right? Like I'm going to exclude all fossil fuel companies, and that's even a newer version, right? In the beginning, it was kind of gun manufacturers, tobacco was a big one early on. Even like back when I was going to college, we were trying to fight against apartheid, so we were pressuring the universities to divest from South Africa, right? So, hey,
Mhm.
university with your giant endowment, take your money out of any companies from South Africa. And that made a difference, right? It exerted some pressure. So, this kind of investing has been around for a long time. The newer versions are, some of them, I'm not going to just say no to the whole sector of the industry,
Right.
but I'm going to number one, find the better actors, and number two, pressure them to make change. So there was a
Hmm.
story last year, it was a fairly small company that actually proposed new directors for the ExxonMobil board of directors. And they were kind of a small mutual fund. However, they got Vanguard and
Oh,
BlackRock, two of the largest money managers in the world. They got them on board with their campaign. And they actually got three of their foreign directors onto the board.
wow.
So these are people with, kind of more an environmentalist perspective. I mean, that's real change right there.
Definitely. And that's the thing. I mean, we've seen year over year, the more we push, the more things happen in any area. And so, we can't settle for just taking it. We're definitely putting our money where we speak. Um,
There is something to be careful about, though, right? I mean, you might have heard of this term greenwashing, right?
mm,
Like you go to the store and I'm trying to buy a environmentally friendly cleaning product for my, cleaning my bathroom, and there's something that has a green label on it and it says all natural, but you kind of have to dig a little deeper, right? You have to look at the ingredients and say, oh my God, that's like totally a carcinogen. I'm not going to
right.
buy that. It's kind of happening with investing too, right? There's even been some scrutiny from the regulators now about companies who are slapping an ESG label on their mutual funds and saying, hey, invest with us, because the dollars are moving. There's a big increase in assets in ESG type strategies. So the big players in investing are like, oh, we'll just call it ESG, and then, money will come. So you
Yeah.
do have to be an educated consumer.
And so what kind of, education do you recommend for some people? Because I know every time we talk about ESG, it's always about educating yourself. And I don't want people to be turned off like I don't have,
No.
6 hours to put aside to go educate myself every week. So what's the best way or best tips to kind of go about this?
Well, there's a couple good resources, and I'm speaking slowly while I pull up my little resources here. um, there's a really good website for mutual funds called, let's see, sorry,
No
I think it's called,
worries.
yeah, asyousow.org. So SOW, like you reap what you sow kind of thing, asyousow.org. So they've got a section called Invest Your Values. And then you can kind of pick like, oh, I'm more into environmental things, or, whatever your values that you want to look at. And then you can actually look at different mutual funds. You can either enter the name of a fund, say you already have a fund and you want to see how it stacks up, or you can
Hmm.
kind of look for like, what are the best ones here? So yeah, might that take you 10, 15 minutes of research? Yes, but it's
Right.
not, like you don't have to go get an MBA in this kind of stuff to make
Right.
educated decisions.
And that's the thing is, it's so great. I don't want to turn people off and being like, you have to educate or you have to do all this. You can go to your financial advisor and say, do you do ESG investing? How can we
Yeah,
move my funds over there? Because more people do it than you expect. And if
yes.
they're not, maybe that's time to change your advisor or whatever that may be to, again, line your values with, where you put your money.
Or have a conversation, right? I mean, I'm
Definitely.
I'm I'm not a one size fits all kind of person, right? So I don't
Right.
think necessarily everybody needs to do this, but if it's
Right.
something that speaks to you and that gets you excited, because that's one of the other raps against women in investing, right? Like, oh, they're not interested. Well,
Oh, we're
I think,
interested.
right? Exactly. Yeah. Do we want financial security? I would think so. But, what I love to see is a lot of these mutual funds will share their stories, right? Like, hey,
Mhm.
here's a company we engaged with and how it changed the story at that company, or here's the impact we've had. Here's a company we decided to sell. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think
Mhm.
is interesting, and then can get people talking too, right? Like, oh my
Right.
gosh, did you know that this mutual fund just did this? And then maybe the friends think, oh, I want to do that too,
Look at all of us talking about mutual funds.
right?
But you'll learn, a lot more about these companies and where they're from and where you're spending your money and who you can support even more because you didn't realize what a great story it was or how inspirational it really was,
Yeah.
which is always a lot of fun.
And I would
Uh,
say, like, if you've got a retirement plan at work, right? Ask, like, take a look at the fund lineup. And if there isn't something that is, an ESG type of fund, agitate, right? Ask
mhm.
HR, like, hey, how come we don't have an ESG fund? I think that would be a really nice thing to have. The more people who ask, the more likely they are to do something about it.
Exactly. And if that's an option, people who didn't even know that was an option definitely could change their mind,
Yep.
and definitely get more involved. So if someone was looking to do this ESG investing, how would that process kind of start with you, Stephanie, if someone called you up?
Oh, it's always starts with, and kind of to back up again, right? You were talking about, yes, people should invest instead of save. Well, I would say, and this, right? You need to do both.
It's a
So
full
the first,
picture. Yes.
yeah, exactly, right? Like, yeah, you should have some money in the bank. And then you can talk about which bank should it be in, which is a whole nother kind of area of stuff.
We'll have to
But
get you back on here to talk about that.
right. And I have someone who's even better at it, I'll connect you with. But and then, like, okay, of the money that should be invested, let's talk about, all the normal questions. What's it
Hmm.
for? When are you going to need it? Right? What role does this pot of money play in your life? Oh, this is the money that you want to make sure, you're not living on the street eating cat food when you're 85. Okay, now we know, right, kind of how it should be invested. And then, like, I ask, is investing in line with your values something that's of interest to you? And
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, oh yeah, absolutely, definitely. Or sometimes they've already mentioned it. Or sometimes it's like, oh, wait a minute, tell me more about that.
Right.
And then, we kind of explore what that means. And some people come down like, absolutely everything I'm in must have an impact kind of filter on it. And other people are like, hey, you know what? Let's try a couple of those funds in with just a regular mix. And then we
Right.
kind of evaluate and go forward from there. And, some people have very specific interests. You can have a social justice type of mandate. You can have, animal friendly, animal welfare can be an issue. There's all different ways to invest your values now.
And I think that's one of the hardest things is kind of like, I love all these things. Where do I put my money? Because they're all so important, and would love to help them all. But I guess I'll just have to make more money. But that is the thing is, nothing goes in one pot. You have all these different things. You can dabble, you can separate. So it's not, you don't have to plunge 2 feet first and in the 12-foot end. It's definitely different
Totally.
baskets all around.
And I think every step we make in that direction has an impact.
Definitely, definitely. I feel like this has already been a lot of great information. Are there any key points that we're really missing here?
I think, if you do, like you said, right, if you have the conversation with your advisor or say with your partner or spouse or somebody else, and you kind of start to get that negative feedback, maybe just know that it's still a common view, but it's kind of an outdated view, right?
Hmm.
Like when I talk to my husband and he says, oh, I shouldn't eat that, it's high in cholesterol. I'm like, oh, that's old news. Eating
Right.
cholesterol doesn't give you high cholesterol. Like, catch up with the times, right? Like, you know, go out and find some other resources. There's some really great books, and I'm going to scramble while I try to remember the name of them. I actually had a couple podcast episodes on ESG earlier this year.
And what's
Janine
your podcast
Forpo,
name?
Take Back Retirement. We
Take
just
Back
won an
Retirement.
award last week
Woo.
from our podcast. Take Back Retirement. Yeah, we had a bunch of episodes earlier this year on ESG and just aligning your money with your values more broadly.
It's it gives a whole new power to every dollar that you earn. Not
Yeah,
even that the way you earned it, but then the way you spend it out and knowing how much that's worth. That's your energy. Those are your values that you're pushing out. So it's awesome to really give your money that power.
and I think the cool thing about investing it as opposed to giving it, right? Like if you have $100 to give, you give it once and you've given it, and that's great. But if you invest it, then your $100 grows to 150, grows to 200, and it's still making an impact along the way.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I think this has been a ton of great knowledge. I really appreciate you coming on today, Stephanie, and just giving some of this information to get some wheels turning about some great ideas that we can really speak with our money. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they have more questions or want to get started?
Sure. So my website, my company is called Sofia Financial. That's Sophia with an F, Sofia, Stephanie with a PH, Sophia with an F. Um, and then I'm at Sophia Financial on the various social medias or the
Awesome.
podcast. All your podcast places take back retirement.
Take Back Retirement. Yeah, we'll have to check that out because it got an award. So I love award-winning things. Stephanie's also one of our Purse Strings Approved professionals. So you can check her out on our site, pursestrings.co. And yeah, if you guys have any questions about this, please reach out. We love to keep talking about investing all month in this Facebook group or shoot us an email because you're not the only one with that question, I promise you. But until next week, we'll see you guys then. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.